The following episode was recorded live with an audience present. You will hear questions being announced from those who were viewing and in attendance. Thank you for joining another episode of Tarot Tuesdays. Welcome to the Aligned Life, the Goddess Life, where we dive into living life fully aligned, mind, body, spirit, both at peace and unbothered. Join Layne and I as we dive into an episode that we recorded during a live segment, talking about the energies that we have experienced and how they relate to cards and their spreads.
I'm just feeling a little like light, like I'm just observing. I'm observing as time is passing. I'm observing as other people are moving through their choices. And I'm just like, I don't know, I'm feel kind of removed, even though I'm fully present.
Oh, yes, I'm right there with you. It's not necessarily like taking an adjacent seat or taking a seat back, but it's more
Aw.
like being present for the experience instead of
Yeah.
being present for the motion.
Yeah. And like seeing the greater ripple effects. Like I'm just like like in real time. It's almost like a warp time where it slows down and I like observe like, oh, okay, rippling out, and then watching it affect other people as it ripples out, and then I'm, in my center observing it, like, those experiments when you're a kid, when you watch, like, they would do like ripples, and then you'd watch the interference when the ripples hit the side of the, container, and they come back, and that ripple interference pattern, and I'm like just watching it all.
Oh yeah. That's also been a thing in like shadow work over the last like week or so. It's, understanding how the decisions that you make ripple out into the ether, but also understanding that ripples happen when other people make decisions
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that inner working of that true understanding of the separation of each individual and how their life is being affected by everything that's going on around them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been so, so wild and so awesome to experience while at the same time being very, very sludgy. I think that
Huh?
this is a good lesson for a lot of people that, the sludge doesn't have to be bad. The sludge just has to be moved through.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is. It's very sludgy. And there's also, with what's going on, make sure that you keep your awareness, they say, energy flows where your attention goes. So keeping your awareness like with you and with what is yours in your, sphere of influence, and not going too far outside of that, and allowing yourself to be influenced by the greater other things that are going on that are trying to cause some pretty big waves right now. Um, I know I'm speaking kind of coded, but everyone knows what's going on, like, unless you're living under an absolute rock. Um, and so you can get caught up in that sludge, or you can keep your awareness where you can move through it in your just in what you're doing in
Yes.
your day to day. Yes.
Yes. And I believe it's Stacy Stacks commented and said that it makes sense about the weighted flowing blanket as the energy. Because yeah, it is.
Yeah.
There's a comfort in
Hmm.
this particular kind of connection. Again, even though it is sludge, it's like I make it in my mind's eye, it looks so much more similar to like a mud bathroom
Ooh, I
where
like
like
that.
you're getting all of the nutrients and information and you're experiencing the energy, but it's here to rejuvenate your understanding and that connection.
Like I just put cucumbers over my eyelids when you said that.
Yes, everything cooled down.
just just a cooling mud bath, and I'm just gonna sit in it. And like choosing your mud bath, like we're not, in some rancid mud. We're in some wonderful clay with minerals and earth energy, and we're just like, yes, this is where I'm at.
Yep. Yep. Full acceptance and understanding that energetic
Mhm.
release into things. It's beautiful.
100%. Yeah, it can be. It can be. I was just drawn to like dreams where you're trying to like punch underwater, and you can't
Yes.
land the punch. So like what are you doing? Like maybe you should just kind of float away, you know?
Right. Or like lead on to some other skills to find your way through the water instead of fighting it. Um,
Well, yeah, because we're having this huge influx of deep intuitive energy right now. And so it is kind of falling into or coming back into a craft or something maybe that you enjoyed creating as a child, like and even like a coloring book, there's these great coloring books for adults. I've fallen into a passion for painting through this time. So finding something channel that's kind of a through a play, if you will, like doing doing something where you're still kind of sitting with it, but then you're creating and crafting through it.
yes. I like that. And I think it's there's also been I've actually put my creativity on hold, but it has been more so for just a different avenue of intuitive play where I got back into doing my devotionals, which I haven't done in a very long time.
Right.
But in this, being more connected to the deities that I work with, being more connected to the spiritual path that I am looking to grow on in my own understanding and identity and the lens through which I see the world. And this is one of those times to heavily cultivate that. And you can use
Hmm.
that same creative channel to build that spiritual connection too.
Absolutely. No, that's very in keeping with the energy. Yeah. Sitting with devotional time, speaking with your guides and your deities. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that water, being although having that creative flux and flow and all of this, I always attribute creative energy to water as well as to fire because although fire is like the ultimate creator, I always am drawn back to the way that water carves its own path
Hmm.
and how it erodes all of these other things around it, whether that be conflict, obstacle, understanding, and it brings us to this new place. And I feel like that intuition just grabs it so much and it becomes this more spiritual creativity, whereas fire is much more of a physical creation.
Right. So what you're leading to is really cool because what do you get when you mix water with fire? Like, say
Steam.
there's a vessel holding your water, you have the steam, which becomes and it transmutes into that air quality. So when you have that huge, deep well of intuition, and then you do an action, and that action could be simply sitting and meditating, like that is an action. Um,
Yes.
it leads into air qualities, which are of the mind, new ideas, new channels through which to express yourself, communicating.
Yes. Issa from Issa's Valley just commented. She says, often it can feel like the drama of the online community is reflective of the reality of the physical world. Yet when I focus on the actual world around me, how people are interacting, what discussions are being had, they're not the same or reflective at all. One disconnect between global versus local, online versus in person.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
that is a big, I feel like that is also a huge part of becoming aware and having this gift of higher consciousness. That was something that came to me. Actually, I was thinking about it last night. How I was thinking of samsara and the idea of how if you do not change and understand and ascend to nirvana in that great idea, um, well, what is samsara like truly like? And I look around at everyone around me and I'm like, okay, there are people who are clearly following this higher conscious vein. And then there are people
Mm-hmm.
who clearly are so tuned out of their own consciousness. And I'm like, those are the people that are coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And it's so bonkers. It is so bonkers.
entirely. And it's so interesting. And it bring I've had this conversation a couple of times this week with somebody in different areas, but it's this concept of once you have awakened, there you can't go back. You can't go back to your old way of thinking. And I related it to once you learn to read, you can't not ever read again. You just can't go back. You read everything you see. So once you've awakened, once you've opened up further to the intuition, to the bigger blanket of everything, um, your perception is forever altered and you have to go with it. You have to keep going with it.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like this kind of ties in the way that we were talking about the elements and how, when we heat the water, we get the steam that moves up into the air. Once you have evolved or transmuted something, you can't just make the steam back in. Well, I mean, steam will eventually become water if it condenses and through a whole other process. And I think that kind
Right.
of further proves the point that you can't just undo the doing.
No, you can't go back. And that's a tricky place. And that kind of encapsulates a lot of what I've been feeling with, this energy that we've been moving through. We've crossed some kind of threshold and we maybe didn't even notice when we crossed the threshold, but we're firmly on the other side. And now everything just looks and feels slightly different. And so relationships often are the first indicators that you've transitioned into a higher um, like level of thinking and feeling and being, because now you're no longer on the same wavelength with those people, and it's a very sharp, because those relationships fall away, and it's painful, but you can't quite put your finger on like what's different about it until it is. And then you can't go back. You can't go back to how the relationship was. You have to keep moving through it. And so some of those relationships either fall away or maybe they do grow with you. Um, More often than not, I find that certain relationships fall away and then you get new relationships coming in that are equal in resonance to you, to where you're at this new moment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like I'm guided to that phrase that we hear so often, if you love something, if you let it go, it'll come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And because when we look at it through this lens, which There's all different kinds of lenses we can look through, but when we're looking at it through this particular lens, the idea is like, okay, well, I need to move forward. I love this
Mhm.
being. This being is not ready to move forward. If I let this being go and say I need to do what is best for me in order to continue me and my forward motion, you need to do some work.
Yeah, it gives them space to do their work too.
Exactly. And if they are meant to meet you on that higher wavelength, when they do the work, they may meet you there.
Right.
You all may
Yep.
come back together. You may have that beautiful reunion. Um, but it
Well,
has
we did
to
it.
be done in the work, right? Yes. Yes, we
I mean, not
did.
that we had a falling out, it's just that we both had life happening,
Yeah.
and we had to take a step back from the space that we were sharing at that time. And I always, through that interim was like, oh, I love her. I can't wait to connect with her. I do want to reach out again. And it just wasn't time yet as we both went through our separate things. And then when it was time, it was time. And it was like, hello.
Yes. And we came right. Well, and it wasn't even right back. It was this level up of
Yes.
returning and this different perspective and understanding because we both had to heal to come
Mhm.
to come back at some other point. And it is a continual process of healing. I saw something the other day that this is drawing me to also. It was something one of my family members posted and I ended up sharing it on the Book of the Face also. And it was this idea how healing, although yes, we never really truly stop our healing process. We are we are beings that need growth. We need evolution. We need transmutation and we need change. So it's a constant progress. The idea is reconnection to the earth, to spirit, to being, to the elements. It is reconnecting with all of these other pieces that are not just ourselves. That is something where when I looked at it, I was like, okay, so that is where this idea of okay, I need to step away from all of these people. I need to disconnect. This is where technology has kind of like run amok
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
we're now in constant connection with the people and we're removing ourselves from these other healing avenues. But I see this revolution in these beings starting again where people are returning to the forest. They're returning to, oh, there are lots of people returning to nomadic lifestyle even. And it has gone
Mm.
into this realm where healing looks and the possibility of healing is so totally different. And I love it. I love where it's going.
I found like personally, like because we can have immediate contact with anybody at any time, um, I've just gotten to a point where I will be checking my phone, so I can set it aside and I will check it, you know? Um,
Yes.
and just acknowledging that, just because I might be getting a text at any moment doesn't mean I need to be on alert every minute.
Yes. Yeah, I have noticed that it's really hard for people to step away from those. I saw this thing where the idea was that neurospicy or neurodivergent people often just feel like the tone of their phone, like your ringtone or your alert is just too much to handle. And I always attributed it, like the fact that I keep my phone on silent to being a neurospicy thing because I do also totally dislike that sound.
Oh,
However,
100%.
but if I leave it off, I find myself checking my phone when I need to check my phone instead of it being a constant that is in my hand.
Right. Right. So there has to be a balance there because I have my phone often on silent just because I'm like, I don't need to hear every little email and, app notification that I get.
Oh yeah. Oh, I don't
But
even
then
have
I'm,
notifications for my emails because that would drive me crazy.
oh, I know. But it calls me back to the time, 90s kid here where, we had a house line. And so when you left the house, no one could get a hold of you and it was fine. And then you get back home and you check your messages, you know?
Oh yeah, exactly. There were times, like you said, with house phones, we didn't have these different connections. We had to go out and experience the world in order to make these connections. We had to actually make forward motion. I feel like a big theme of what we're being drawn to talk about today is motion. Maybe as we start
Yeah.
diving into the tarot cards, maybe we're supposed to be talking about the wands today.
You had mentioned how the cards connect to each other. And so say, we draw cards that are in this emotion and where you're at with your emotion. And then, you draw the next card. It's usually the indicator of your next step, the motion to take to move through that emotion. And
Yeah.
well, what is emotion? It's in motion. It's to put you get this emotion to drive the body, the physical, into an action of some sort. And even if that action is to step back, sit with yourself, you know, whatever, everything is always in motion. But how are you choosing? What choices can you make?
Right. Oh, yeah. And even though we're always in motion, even though everything is always in motion, this is another place where we start to see stagnancy come into play because you can be stagnant and just kind of, I see it as like those big wave pools at amusement parks.
Mm,
Where if you are not making your forward motion, you are just being bounced around by the waves of life. And
right.
you are bumping into everyone else. You're getting like these weird looks. You've hit a wall.
Mhm.
You've probably been rolled under a wave or two. And it just feels like everything is really overwhelming. It's all against you. And it's because you're not going with the flow. You're trying to be this staunch, stagnant thing that is
Yeah,
just like, I am here in this water.
right.
And the
Right.
water's like, no, thank you.
Well, and that's a great visual because the water, those wave parks, they take breaks, to like build the machine, like again or whatever. And so then it goes still, but that's that time you can prepare yourself. Like you're not actually entirely motionless. Your heart is still beating, catching your breath, you're collecting wiping the water from your eyes, getting your raft ready. That's what stillness without stagnancy can look like as well.
Yes. Yes, being prepared, having those methods, we can build tools and have tools to move easier with the flow. Um, that is another thing that I've been thinking about over the past like week
Hmm.
is how we're being called to an old form of building community. And I'm going to say old simply because it's not that it has just totally checked out, but it's something that is just no longer really truly practiced. As I grow here in a new place, most of you know that I have moved states and cities and all of the things. And I've been looking for community. Like where I come from, it's very easy to find. You can just walk into a place and make friends. And it's like, okay, we're here, we're doing the things. And I look into making deeper connections here in my new home. And it's so interesting how different things are. Like people
Mhm.
don't just like go to places to hang out and meet each other. People like they're going specifically to farmers markets, which I thought was really awesome. But they're doing volunteer work in things that they like to do in order to become parts of those communities.
Mhm.
They're creating spaces in order to grow the communities that have kind of dwindled off because again, we're being called back to this older, less recognized version of community where it's like, okay, we need to be actively doing the things together instead of just sharing space.
Yes.
And yeah, that's
Yep.
something that we don't see a lot of anymore. And that goes with that idea of like, well, sometimes you have to create your tools. Sometimes you have to follow that forward motion in a different way than you were before. Not trying to be stagnant, but also not wanting to drown.
Right. Well, and I think you're going towards old because it's like that's a very root like going back to our roots, a root chakra thing.
Yes.
We got so compartmentalized and separated, with the nuclear family and the economics had a lot to do with that. It was a lot easier to get a single family home, and now
Oh
it's
yeah.
not. So now things have shifted to where we're starting to recognize that what we lost from the village, from that community, and what community is doing. It's doing life together. Um, and so, and I have a similar experience because I relocated too. That time that we were apart was a big relocation
Yes.
time for me. And I'm here, and what I've been experiencing is just this feeling of spirit just telling me to take my time because I am in a space now, and it's so funny how everything correlates, like in numerology, like what kind of number year you're in. This is a number year for me where I'm building, and I am putting in those roots, so I'm really taking my time, um and not trying to do too much and put myself out there too far, um to spaces that may not be there ready for me yet, or the right connection yet. um but just more of an allowing. And what I've found is some very beautiful interactions, like going to the post office, doing what I have to do. And then I met this beautiful soul that happened to get in line behind me at the post office. She's she's like, I'm 71 and she's an artist. And I was like, oh, girl, like we need to be friends.
Yes. Oh, I love that. We do have a question in our comments. Any tips on decompressing when you are a person that can pick up on everyone's emotion? Normally, I'm very good at this, but lately there's been so much negative energy in the environment that it's been hard to ground and not let it affect you. This was asked by Heather
Mm,
Johnson.
it is. It is. My biggest thing, like mantra as an empath, is what is mine and what is not mine. What is mine
Yes.
and what is not mine. And like really wading through and like doing the like 5 sense check-in. Here comes my little one. Hopefully he's quiet. So I do like my 5 senses check-in. What's one thing I can see? What's one thing I can feel? What's one thing I can hear? What's one thing I can smell or taste, right? To get back into what is mine, my moment, my atmosphere right around me. And then from there, going, okay, that's not mine. Um,
Yes.
and I don't know, spirit's funny because it's like giving me this other mantra, like, not my problem. I mean, as a collective, yes. And so there's a very hard dichotomy between having so much empathy for the collective and what the collective is going through, and like part of that grieving for what is going on the greater level. But then there is a necessity to come back into the self and addressing what is mine first. Because, like we talked about, those ripple effects, the best and only way to make a greater change for the collective, to the benefit of the collective, is doing my best me and allowing those ripples to ripple out and affect those closest to me, who then their ripples ripple out. And right, you
Yes.
know, it's like that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing,
Yes.
but on an
Yes.
energetic level.
But it is. And it's like, for me, one of the things that I do, which you can do within that same idea of like checking in with your senses and understanding what is yours and what is not yours, I'm a big fan of releasing, which is in
Mm-hmm.
that idea too. It's not it's not mine, so I'm not going to deal with it like you said. And although yes, we do have to come back to it as a collective at some point, or we have to, if you are a spiritual worker, or if you do this professionally, you sometimes have to come back to it. I will write it down
Yeah.
and I will be like, okay, right now, this energy exists here in this place on this paper.
Uh-huh.
It is there for me to come back and pick up at another time.
Yes.
If it
And
has
there's
fixed
also
itself, then that's fine. But if not, I'm here to help it when it is time for me to do so.
right. And I also like to think of like an an energetic light burst from me out to the everything, you know, like placing that like hope, intention, love for what's external and way over there, and just blasting it out in all directions, and then trusting and like letting go and giving it to the universe, you know, take my
Yes.
good juju and add it to the solution, and just
And
trusting that I don't have to be observing it, you know,
yes.
so closely for change to occur, because the universe is observing it. It's already got it.
Exactly. And you can also this also if you practice Reiki or any type of energy healing, there's an old meditation, an old visualization that most of us have done or learned about at least once, the eggshell. And
Okay.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, for those of you who are listening, there's an old visualization meditation where essentially you pour all of this white light energy into you, similarly like you would through a Reiki healing session. Or if you're a Reiki practitioner, how you would have it channeled through you, and you allow it to wrap around you like an egg. And you
Oh,
create this energetic layer between you and the other thing so that way you can have a separate energetic space that is just yours. And you can say, okay, the other energies can only come so far. We're not going to allow them to come any further. Um, and you can do this too, because sometimes energies are so strong, or if you're still practicing it, then it may feel a little bit different. But in working with the ideas of energy, you can totally create this barrier for yourself
mm-hmm.
and say,
Yeah.
you're not welcome in my space.
I like that. I like that. I've always thought of like those of us who are um really, really resonating with that like light worker, you know, shadow worker, light worker paradigm, that we're like scattered around the globe and we're like these beacons. And so like I zoom out and I see the earth, and then I see all these like beams of light coming out all around it, and we're like radio beacons. And so we're just kind of like shooting out our light goodness and like radio frequencies, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like this all keeps kind of coming back into that idea of like the things resonating with one another or attracting to one another, and that idea of how things work together in order to maintain this balance. So yeah, maybe let's we've talked for almost an hour on everything but tarot.
Have we? I
Uh,
don't even know how long we've been talking. It's just been flowing. But
yes.
yeah,
let's dive in a little bit and let's talk a little bit about spreads, which I know
Yes.
we talked about before, but it is this correlation thing, and the relationship of things to each other just seems to be a huge piece right now. And I feel like spreads are something that we all learn about. And I feel like they're one of the things that is the least talked about. We're like, here's an example of a spread. This is what each card means in the spread. And then people are stuck doing the same five spreads for the next 10 years.
Well, I can be guilty of that too, because there are those tried and true ones that you just know.
Yes. Yes. And I agree with that. And the tried and true ones are fantastic, but I really want to dive into why we use spreads and
Mm-hmm.
how the cards talk to one another in them. There's actually, I think you and I have talked about this deck before. There's a deck called the Dreams of Gaia deck. And
Mm-hmm.
my one of my favorite spreads comes from the book that accompanies that deck, and it is the what is it called? It's the tree. It's huge. It
Yes,
encompasses
I've
like
done that one.
13
Yes. Mm-hmm.
cards, and you walk
Yes.
through your roots and your branches and your options. Uh I love this spread because it plants an entire picture of where you're going, where you could go, and what
Right.
you're going to need to get to the end of each of these limbs. So, when we start looking at spreads, I think it's really, really important for everyone to understand that spreads, although are a lot of them have been tried and true, a lot of them are very old. We're seeing an uptick in people kind of creating their own spreads recently,
Mm-hmm.
especially for those
Mm-hmm.
people who go to tarot websites. Um,
Yeah, or watching people do tarot online on YouTube, and they just keep pulling cards and pulling cards and pulling cards. And that's fun. I mean, there's no wrong way to read tarot. The the interesting thing about a spread to me is that instead of just pulling a card and then asking, how does this apply to me? You first place that intention when you say, I'm going to use this spread. And so you know going into it that this card is representing where I'm at presently. This card is showing where I've come from, what I've come through, and then what I'm moving into and what I'm moving through with possible potential outcomes. Or if you don't do anything at all, this is the potential outcome, right? And so
yes.
it gives you so much more clarity instead of just looking at a card kind of blankly and wondering, how does this apply to me?
Oh yes. I tried there for a minute, and it's something I would like to get back to, but I find myself called to other pieces first, and this is kind of like a side thing that I want to do. But I started doing like the weekend like shadow check-ins with my soul mirror deck with people, and doing it more so as a collective idea. But even when I pull those, I've noticed that there is still that stark difference, because there's so many people that are just pulling card after card. And I'm asking three specific questions when I do mine. We're not going to ask for extra cards in it. We're going to ask, what shadow am I going to be faced with during this time? How am
Mm-hmm.
I going to move through it? Is the second card. And how do I integrate it for alignment is the third card.
See, and I love that. I feel like you can get so much more from the cards with less. Like there, because you
Yes.
can go so deep with each card that when you keep adding more and more and more cards until you've gotten really comfortable with your intuition and you're able to say, okay, this is what this is speaking to, this is what this is speaking to, and just trusting that intuition that comes through. Until then, it's smarter to have a smaller spread because like we said, each card is so dynamic. Each card has a light and a shadow and everything in between, and you can really explore like your spread, what is out of alignment, right? And
Yeah.
just really look at the whole perspective of it, go around it 360, and then, what will help me get in alignment, and look at that full 360.
Oh, yeah. And it also shows us when we look at these things from these different perspectives, it shows us all of the different understandings of each card, and we can see how they relate to one another. Now that
Mm-hmm.
deck, the Soul Mirror deck, is an oracle deck, but to just give an example, it has cards in it like intuition, wish, it has sexuality is one of them. It has all of these different statement words. And these statement words, when we look at them and we're saying, okay, so what is the shadow that I have to work through today? And
Mm-hmm.
yours comes up as wish. And that is an idea of like wanting for more than what you have, not setting yourself up to successfully attain what you want because you're doing things
Mm-hmm.
for others. Um, it shows a whole perspective. But let's take that same card and look at it in the idea of, okay, well, how am I going to move through this particular shadow? And your card comes out as wish. How are you going to move through it? Well, it's focusing on your manifestation. It is not allowing the bubble of others, like we just talked about with answering Heather's question, not allowing the bubble of others and the needs of others to come into your space and take over. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
I'm
about
also
focusing.
getting Well, I'm also getting like, are you, like other on the opposite side of the, pendulum swing is, are you wishing big enough? Are you allowing yourself to
Yes.
open up to an even bigger idea of what could be, or are you limiting yourself?
Exactly. And that self-talk has been another big hot topic over the last few weeks because self-talk limits your potential. And when we start getting into the self-talk of things, especially when we're looking at the larger spreads in tarot, when we're putting the two together in the ideas of divination and pulling these cards, um your self-talk is going to go the entire way when you're reading these spreads. So
Mm-hmm.
limiting yourself is not the is, you want to get bigger than that. Sorry, I was just guided to say that. But then we can move the wish card into the very last part of that three card idea. And how are we going to integrate it? Well, making our wishes align
Mm-hmm.
with what we're doing in life, making sure that they are big enough for ourselves, using it as a system of checks and balances. We see wishes as being hopeful. We see the word wish and we immediately align it with the idea of the star in tarot. But wishing is
Mm-hmm.
manifestation. Wishing, in my opinion, is way more akin to like the fool's energy of, okay, we got to get up and go.
Yep. I'm also getting allowing. Um,
Yes.
well, and that's where, so say you get, the wish card, um, and it's either you're not wishing big enough, or you're way too out there that you're not zeroing in on your manifestation. Like, which one is it? That's when you can say, I would like a clarifier, one,
Yes,
and
not
see the
30.
energy. Yeah, not 30, but one, and see which way that energy shifts. Is it, and then that's where you can build that understanding of which direction you can go with wishing. Because
Oh, yeah.
sometimes you need to narrow down your manifestation. You need, and in order to get it in alignment, you have to like weigh it out and really hone in on it. But if you've already honed in on something that's not aligned, then you need to open up more to what's potential, what's possible.
Oh, 100%. I was guided to, I'm gonna go ahead and just like pull two cards. Um,
Yes, ma'am.
so we
Yes,
can
ma'am.
see
Let's
how
see
they
what we
work
get.
together. Because yeah, like that is the whole thing, is everything is so different. It is so there are so many different ways that we can read these cards per where they place in a spread. So firstly, I
Mhm.
want to also say that if you're doing a 3-card spread, it is incredibly beneficial, in my opinion. This can differ opinion by opinion, but I'm a big fan of using it as a current obstacle advice instead of a past, present, future.
Mhm.
So many
Yep.
people immediately go to the past, present, future, and I am not saying that I'm not a fan of that spread, but I'm saying that you're mostly going to get confirmation in that spread, especially as a
Yeah.
beginner to tarot.
Yeah.
But if you're
Well,
looking to,
even no, even now, I've been reading for what, 25 years, 30 years. And if
yes,
I don't place the intention of my spread first, then all I will get is confirmation of what I've already been dealing with and walking through. And it's like,
exactly.
thank you, Spirit. I got that. I need to know where to go from here forward.
Yes, yes. And your spread carries the intention of your reading. That is the whole purpose of it, is to be like, okay, show me what I'm doing now that I need to change.
Mm-hmm.
Show me where this could lead me, what
Mm-hmm.
obstacle I'm going to face. I pull an obstacle and an advice in every single reading I do, because there's always going to be something standing in your way, and you're always going to need to know how to go around it or above it or through
Yep.
it.
Right. And if nothing changes, what's the outcome? And
Exactly.
if I move through it, what's the possibility? And just a reminder, the cards themselves are literal card stock. They don't hold a separate consciousness from us. It is our intention, as we have stepped over the threshold, that this is a synchronicity universe, and we're paying attention to the synchronicities. And as we place our intention into what card will synchronistically appear as we pull it, that it'll bypass that prefrontal cortex right through subconscious to higher self.
Yes, absolutely.
Just just a small reminder. I feel like we talk to our computers, we talk to our phone as if they're a separate entity. Um, Cards are not a separate entity from us. They are at what we imbue in them.
They're one of the tools that we explained earlier that can help you find your way in your wave pool of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are your
It's like a
floaties.
pendulum. Nothing is moving the pendulum but us. Like we literally are moving it. It's just through higher self, through subconscious, using muscle movement to connect through and past that mental block.
Yes. So the 2 cards that I pulled one because last week we talked about the cups, and the week before that we talked about the major arcana. So I pulled one from the cups and I pulled one from the major arcana. That way we don't lose people as we go through this. Um, and the obstacle, and this is just a generic obstacle, is the 8 of cups reverse.
Oh.
And the advice, I actually
Uh-huh.
love this. I'm going to take a picture of this and show it to you all later, and I will probably post it on Facebook, because in this particular deck, these 2 cards are so complementary. But the advice is temperance.
Oh, I
And
love it.
I
You
love
you
this.
can't make this shit up. You cannot, like of everything we've talked about, right? we we have 8 of cups, so we've come to a place where we have to reflect, we have to observe everything going on around us, and it's time to let go of some things,
Yes.
some burdens. Just let them go and recognize that we still have cups full. So don't dwell on the few cups that you have to let go of in order to move forward with a lighter burden. um and recognizing you will move into and finding more. And with temperance, it's about taking what you've now known, what you've gone through, and that, you're leaving certain things behind and finding that new alchemical balance with what you have, what you're going to obtain, and making it anew. And temperance has that cups imagery in it too.
Oh
Oh,
yes. Oh yes.
oh my God.
Like I said, I'm going to share a picture of these two cards because the eight of or the in this deck it's the eight of potions. But
Yeah.
it has this character who he's fallen asleep on his like work in his lab,
Mhm.
and he has these test tubes in front of him that are full and glowing. Some of them are kind of like wonky and falling out of the holder. But then Temperance is this calm, collected, also in a laboratory, has a test tube that they're pouring from into a larger vessel. So
Hmm.
it's so much like, okay, yes, you need to take a step back. You need to reevaluate what you're doing, what it is that you have brought in that's not really working for you. That's not, what is it? Why do you have so many test tubes? You don't need that many, especially if some are falling out of the holder. You need the ones that you have perfected that are already glowing at the very beginning. You need to take all these extra ones out of there. And then we need to pour that back into your goal, your direction, your dream. You know where you want to go.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to kind of clean up the edges.
So that's funny because when I speak to my son and like the capacity of science and experiments, I've been really trying to impress upon him the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Which also I correlate to Occam's razor, right? The
Oh, yes.
simplest solution is the best, right? And he even nailed it when I was talking to my son. He's like, if you get too many moving parts, then too much it's too complicated, and any one little thing could throw a monkey wrench in the hole, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's funny. So I went into I have the Light Seers deck, which got really, really popular, and it's very affordable right now, through like Llewellyn and Hay House, because I think a lot of people have been using this deck. And so Eight of Cups for this deck shows that she had cups in the water, these bowls, and some of them sank into the water. And there's still one floating with like flames in it, and she's walking away towards the sun. So she's like not getting back in the water, not digging back in the muck. Here we are back with the mud bath. Um, she's not trying to fight the mud to get her cups back. She's like, okay, I will let that go and I will move forward freely. And right after it, which was interesting when I was just kind of like looking through the deck for these cards, they were right next to each other, temperance. Um, and I don't know, the symbolism on this is interesting. He's got a sun and a moon, like he's playing with both of them, um, kind of balancing those energies.
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
like
The
that.
symbolism's not, yeah, it's a little different. Um, but I guess, I mean, if I were to just simply use the symbolism that is the imagery on this card, is balancing that emotional body with the sun and the action steps, you know?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And not, I think it's also, I see it very much as in, okay, so in that balance, there's a wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that picture for me, because when I see temperance, it's very much, okay, you know where you want to go, you know the risks that you're going to have to take, you know what is going to come before you. I really attribute temperance to patience in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. And I feel like having all of that balance, that need for balance is part of that
Mm-hmm.
representation.
Right. You can't really have one without the other. You
Exactly.
can't be all go without something else inside you motivating it, right? And then you'll get burnt out. And you can't be all dreamy dreams and never take a step in action on them.
Exactly. Just really quick, Heather Johnson made a couple of more comments. One, she said, thanks, that made so much sense when it came to us talking about decompressing and putting some space in between her and the emotional energies of others, or just the energies of the world right
Good.
now. She said she can
Yay.
see where checking in with your own senses will help with the balance. She also, I really like this comment. She said it's such a great way to to bring down the potential mayhem in a spread for yourself. Simply asking for clarification without pulling card after card.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to touch on that as we're talking about spreads and how cards correlate, because yes, when you have a card and you're like, okay, I have the 8 of Cups reversed. I know that this
Mm-hmm.
means I need to let go of some things. I know that this means that I need to rearrange what I'm doing, how I'm looking at things, where I need to kind of clean up the edges. And you pull, and I'm just going to randomly pull from this so we can just have an example. Um, you say, okay, well, I need some clarification on how I'm going to do that with my 8 of Cups. And you get the Ace of Coins, the Ace of Pentacles.
I heard Ace and I was like, I'll laugh if it's Wands because we mentioned that earlier, but Ace of Pentacles makes sense too because that's your material world,
Yes.
and that's what you're physically dealing with. Your home, your finances, like your clothes. Like, I mean, it could very well be like if you just get busy cleaning out your closet just to freshen up some old energy and release and let go of old versions of yourself. I find the closet to be very symbolic because we tend to stash things in our closet for another day, like an old version of ourselves, an old pair of jeans that we just really loved and we want to wear again, but we can't fit into them. So we put it in the back of the closet in hopes that we'll fit into it again. But maybe it's just time to like let go of that and then leave room to bring in new clothes that represent closer to who we are now, you know?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. When we start looking at when we have the Ace of Pentacles or the Ace of Coins energy, especially as a clarifier of something we're supposed to clean out, clean up the edges on, let go of, it very much means that there is a freshening of your space that is needed.
Yes.
I always get very like feng shui energy. I have no idea how
Feng
to do feng
shui.
shui, but I get
Yes.
very big feng shui energy from this because it's like, okay, it's time for you to move all of your furniture around.
Hmm.
And for you to
Well,
realize that like getting rid of things is a thing to do. And I feel like we also very much forget, speaking on the idea of the closet. I love the way you view the closet because that is definitely what my closet does. And I'm not a
yeah.
fan of
I
it.
mean, and some things are worth holding on to and some aren't. And oh, hey, buddy. And feng shui is a great example because our home is a reflection of where we're at mentally, emotionally, right? And
Oh,
so
yes.
sometimes, and they go hand in hand. So if you're having a struggle with your mental health and your emotional health in your space, and you've been trying to do the inner work and you feel like you're not really making gains, getting to work on physically cleaning your space just gives you enough of like they go hand in hand. So it'll give you that oomph, that shift. And then you look back at what just starting with a corner. Like you don't have to do the whole room. I mean, I get a little ADD and I get totally involved and I'm doing
Yes.
it till 11 o'clock at night. Um, but even just one corner, like pick a project corner and just clean that out and let go of things that have collected. It's like, do I really need to hold on to it? And with feng shui, because I've done a really deep dive on that, if I haven't looked at it, touched it, used it in 6 months, and I don't plan to use it in 6 months because that can help with like, seasonal things, like your decorations and stuff. If I haven't touched or looked at it or plan to use it in 6 months, do I really need it?
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. Heather made a comment on the closet. She said, totally. I have been meaning to clean my closet out for months. It truly is a symbol of where I'm storing up all the emotions and life situations that make me feel overwhelmed. I also find I feel like this kind of bridges both of those ideas, because in my closet, I also have a lot of memories. There's a lot of things that I
Mhm.
end up keeping because of its sentimental value. And I will in no way ever tell a person to necessarily get rid of things that are so sentimentally close to their heart that it would like
No,
create problems.
no. There's
I,
always there's always a but, and even if you go full Marie Kondo on your
yes,
place, she speaks of sparking joy, right? So
yes.
if you look at that and that holds like, so much, so many memories, sentimental, good or bad, like if you're still processing it and you just need it, don't let it go.
Oh, yes. And yeah, yeah. If you need it, do not let it go. Um, I do also want to remind people though that sometimes that can hold on to energies. So you may want to do like a thorough discernment and evaluation of what you
Right.
need to hold on to and what you do not.
Oh,
Um,
girl, temperance, discernment.
Yes. Yes, big discernment energy. Um, for instance, like when my grandmother died, she left I got some pieces of her furniture and some like jewelry and stuff like that. And everyone was always really into like keeping the jewelry, keeping all of these smaller pieces of things. And I was like, I don't want any of this. I wanted her furniture. I was like, I want this piece that is going to be passed down from generation to generation to everyone because it is amazing and it
Mhm.
holds a different type of energy than a necklace that she may have worn while she was like in an argument with my
Right.
grandfather or something.
That's kept in a box forever. Yeah,
Right.
100%. See, I have a funny, on the flip side of discernment, I got all of my grandmother's Pyrex and I loved it. I had like a butter dish and so many cool dishes, right? And this was 15 years ago, and we were going to move to Hawaii. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to let this go because these are everywhere. They're all over in the, thrift stores and they're cheap. And
Not
here I am
anymore.
now. Now I'm come back and I'm like just kicking myself because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to have that collection that I had again because the value has gone up. So there's a certain amount of like, again, Eight of Cups. Like I made the best choice I could at the time, and I, honor and forgive myself for
Yes,
making the best choice I could at the time. And what's meant for me will come back to me. Uh,
exactly.
and so there is. You live and you learn. Maybe it's not for you now, and maybe it will come around again later. And maybe you didn't know that it was had such meaning until you let it go, you know?
Oh yeah. 100%. When you start looking at there was another conversation that I had recently, and this one kind of like threw me for a loop. Um, so and this oh my it was the craziest conversation. We were talking about um losing people. Like, we all have a point where we are meant to leave this earth. Um,
Mhm.
and this person had lost someone very close in her family to her. And when we were talking about it, she mentioned how she did not, what are the words I want to use here? She did not really want to like go to see her at a visitation or anything like this. And this was like a person who was very close to her and her family. Um, And her whole idea of this, though, was to hold on to the more material things of hers because
Mm.
that held the memories of her. But she had this idea, and she's the first person I've ever come across that has had this particular type of view, but that the soul is so left from the body and the soul is so gone that holding on to things or even seeing this person during visitation meant like nothing.
Ooh, ooh, that's a bit out of balance.
That's what I thought too. Um, and
Because if I'm, yeah,
it makes me wonder, like, how do how am I trying to phrase this? How is it that you evaluate things to decide what it is that you're going to hold on, what you're going to keep, what has that spirit from that person in it. Like, and that was the
right.
first time I had ever thought of it that way, was coming into this particular conversation, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't imagine thinking about how a person is so totally removed.
Well, and if I can come back to like my Pyrex, and
Yes.
this is something I've helped coach, people that have, more into like that hoarding, thing. The what it is you place the memory in the object. So you feel like if I have this object, I'll never forget this moment with this people and where I was and how I felt. But memories are not held in objects, they're ours. They go with us. So even though, yes, I regret not having the Pyrex just because it's gorgeous, but it doesn't remove me from the memory of my grandmother and even the memory of having the Pyrex. Like that still is with me. Um, so yeah, that's interesting.
Oh yeah, like, and I feel the same way. Like there may be energy. I do believe that there is energy from a person in pieces of things. Um
Absolutely. I've come across some haunted necklaces in the thrift store, I swear.
yes. And like my
Oh,
grandmother's cookbook, which my grandmother, I love you grandmother. However, my grandmother could not cook for the life of her. And the recipes in her cookbook are like, some of them are like cut off of boxes and put into her cookbook from like the 1970s. And I'm like, okay, grandma, I see this, and I plan on using it and kind of altering the recipes because I like a little more flavor in my recipes. But whenever I pick it up, like I feel her. She's in
mhm,
that book. And well, her
right.
energy is in that book. And
It's yeah,
she's not
and
going
she made
anywhere.
yeah, she's imprinted onto it like a snapshot.
Yes.
So like, so again, it's that discernment again, though, like, and how deeply tied to the object do you need to be, in order to move forward? This is so Eight of Cups. It's really working through, is this object the most desirable thing? Is it the connection to the person? If if this object is literally weighing me down, like it's just taking up space and I don't use it, and I don't even know if I necessarily like the object, can I release it to the next person to enjoy and still maintain my connection with that memory, that person, etc. And it's really personal. It's a
Yes.
very personal process for each item. And if you have a struggle with something, set it aside. I suggest putting it in view, like setting it where you can look at it. So every time you walk by it, you look at it, and then you can weigh out as you move through the weeks ahead.
Oh yeah, and make your determination on that. Well, we have, I think this is a good place for us to stop.
Mhm.
And we have hit our time as well, friend. Thank you so much for coming and talking with me. This has been a wonderful conversation. After the last few weeks of just kind of like navigating sludge. So yes, thank you for talking with me and joining me.
Yes, and I hope that everyone else is enjoying it, and I feel like for me this was a really great conversation to remind me that maybe it's time to clean out my closet.
Yes, I think I need to too. Really quick before we go, Heather did make one more comment. She said, I so relate to all of that. I wouldn't say I was removed from the death of my father, but the feeling of I need to keep everything of his down to every little nail or tool he had. It has been a big process. Um, I, that is a really big process.
Mhm.
I feel like this is a theme that may trickle into other conversations as well. So check back with us on Thursday.